Empower to Integrate, a collaborative initiative by Aditus Foundation and the African Media Association Malta. This program is dedicated to advancing integration and social inclusion for third country nationals in Malta. It is funded by the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, co-funded by the European Union and carried out in collaboration with the Parliamentary Secretariat for European Funds.
Welcome to the Empower to Integrate project. This is a platform for third country nationals to help them boost their visibility, amplify their voices, and share their perspective. It also aims to strengthen community empowerment and build social ties in Malta. Hi, I'm Nasli Mayu, and I'm the project lead strategist and radio host. Today we will be talking about how local communities can welcome migrants and build good relationships together. I'd like to welcome our first guest, Lorraine Fotso, who is a woman of deep conviction, remarkable versatility, and a fervent believer, shaped by a Judeo-Christian upbringing. Born in Africa and raised in Europe, she carries a rich cultural blend that gives her a unique perspective on the world. She is part of a rising generation of African women who move confidently across disciplines and cultures, driven by knowledge, faith, purpose, and a desire to make a difference. She's also a trained engineer, an entrepreneur, and project manager. She has a strong interest in law, geopolitics, and both African and American politics. She's an avid reader with a love for history, psychology, and meaningful conversations. Hi, Lorraine. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Nestle. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Hi to every auditor online.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to Dr. Michael Grech, who lectures in philosophy at the Faculty of Education, University of Malta. His main interests are metaphysics, philosophy of language, and philosophy of education. Dr. Grech is also interested in religion, politics, culture, and the intersections between these fields. He contributed regularly to various media in relation to the issues of migrants, integration, and global justice. Hello, Dr. Grech, and
Hi,
thank
Lorraine.
you.
I thank you for the opportunity and for inviting me to your show.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Lorraine, if I could start with you. Do you have any anecdotes to share, moments of solidarity or community initiatives that help you integrate in Malta when you first arrived?
Not necessarily in Malta. So before moving to Malta, I used to be living in Paris. Mm-hmm. And in terms of solidarity or not, I'm not finding anything that comes to my mind right now. Okay. However, the one thing that I can share in terms of the welcoming aspect of the Maltese people was basically this. I met this very first Maltese person when I came here in Malta for the first time 10 years ago for an internship. And of course, given that he was the first Maltese person that I met, I thought every Maltese was like him and, you know, etc. And I was not so amazingly, let's say, negatively surprised to realize that he's more of the exception than the standard from what I met shortly after when I moved here in Malta. So, but yes, I mean, he made me feel welcome, but as I said, it was more of an exception. Mm-hmm. And in terms of solidarity, this is a man that is quite known here in Malta. He's Maltese, typical Maltese, Caucasian man, and he adopted 2 African children, basically. So I think he already knew the difficulties that I would be facing once here in Malta, which is why I believe he gave me that warm welcome.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for sharing that. Michael, from your experience and perspective as an educator and a concerned citizen on global justice, what fundamental values should guide how Maltese communities welcome migrants in relation to dignity, hospitality, and common courtesy?
I think when it comes to value, 2 important values are, one is acceptance, okay, which is a very, very important value, okay, and also with regards, also to an extent, obviously depending on the migrants, in the sense, I mean, we speak about migrants, we put everyone in the same basket, but it is one thing if you migrate to Malta to work, I don't know, with a night company or a gaming company. It's another thing if you are, I don't know, an asylum seeker, okay, or if you are something in between. And different migrants may suffer or may face, okay, different hurdles. For some it will be relatively small, for some it will be relatively big. In relation to such hurdles, okay, especially to the bigger ones, another important value we should have is compassion. Okay, compassion is a very important value, not merely with regards to migrants, but even with regards to members of the same community and the like. Now you are referring to values, which are a very important thing. I would mention something else, which also starts in English at least with V, which is virtue. And I'm understanding virtue in the Greek sense of a skill of how to live. Now, in relation to this issue, okay, and it is an issue which we have been facing now for quite some time, okay, though the type of migrant, I mean, earlier before the program started, we were discussing, okay, about migrants who used to come to Malta in the early years of the 21st century. Okay, third country national nowadays, a lot of them are very different. They come from different backgrounds, they come in different ways, and they also, okay, come to do here different things. In a lot of cases, they even have a different legal status, and so on and so forth. Now, in this regards, I think it's important that we, okay, as locals, both individually, but also or especially people who run certain institutions, starting from government, but even education institutions and the like, which should, I think, have also 4 different virtues. One of them is wisdom, okay, the ability to know, okay, to know what a person faces, why he would come to Malta, what are the possible hurdles he or she may face. The second is courage, and courage in relation to taking decisions which are important, but which may not be popular, especially if you are heading an institution, okay, especially if that institution, I would add, is if that institution is political, okay, and your decisions can affect the life of people. Another virtue, another classical virtue, this time more kind of earlier you mentioned Judeo-Christianity. I mean, Augustine comes to mind is charity. Charity, I don't mean you just give the odd 20 euros when there's a marathon or whatever, but the idea of selfless love. Okay, that you love, you recognize a fellow human being. And finally, I think there is an issue of justice. Okay, the virtue of justice. Okay, we all know justice is a very important component when it comes to migration, or to the different types of migration, or to various types of migration, both in relation to what induces people to leave their country of origin, but also, okay, what in relation to the situation they face once they come to Malta. As I said, I will not put everyone in one basket, but I think, I mean, we speak about inclusion, we speak about rights, but I think, okay, there is a very basic difference. If you come to Malta, okay, in terms of rights, in terms of respect of rights, if you come to Malta and you are part of you have a top job in a top company, I don't know, in gaming or financial service, it's another thing if you are working in construction. It's another thing if you are working, I don't know, providing certain services which are essential to us, healthcare and the like, okay? And I mean, we have to cultivate justice to see that the rights of everyone, okay, are respected, and we don't hide ourselves, both individually, but as a society, and also as a state, okay, behind the legal state of a person.
Yeah.
And see that, I mean, justice prevails. Whatever that means.
Thank you very much for sharing that there, and, you know, pointing out the different values that we need to have in society. Thank you so much. Lorraine, from your own experience, what are some practical steps third country nationals can do to connect with neighbors, break down stereotypes, and help create a welcoming community?
So, before answering to that question, I would like to make a small remark to what Dr. Michael just said right now. I always have a problem here, but not just here in Malta, but everywhere I go, even with the term migrant. it holds a kind a connotation that is very negative, because we're making a difference between migrants and expats, and so all of these people are, and I'm not saying these people in a negative way, but all of these categories, if I can say so, they are foreigners. And as you just highlighted a couple of minutes ago, it is important that whatever position that they're occupying in society, whether it's construction worker or a nurse or a CFO or a vice president of whatever company, the justice system should be regardless of all of that. Before occupying all of these positions, they are individuals, and I think we ought to look at everyone as individuals. But yes, that was just my point. However, to answer your question, getting back to your question, what are some of the steps that we can do as a community or as a society, basically, to step towards one another, right? I would say, I think it goes both ways. Integration, today when we're talking about integration, we're basically expecting the foreign party to integrate better into the culture where they are being hosted. And this is something, although I understand where that reasoning comes from, I tend to disagree a bit, because integration works in both ways. So it's not just the foreign party that has to integrate, but it's also the local party that has to make efforts, in my humble opinion, to step towards the foreign party so that each could live as peacefully as possible together. So how does that work? Let's start with the foreign party. This is one practical example that I always give to foreigners and to non-locals, let's say that way. You can't come to my house and try to rewrite the rules. It just doesn't work. Okay, so however, can I keep my own cultures and traditions in a peaceful way, but not demanding people to whom belong the house to follow what I am doing? This is something, it's a message which is not very popular in certain communities, basically, in the one that I belong to, which is the African community, right? It's not necessarily popular to hear such thing, but in reality, this is not our house. Originally, we're trying to make it a home, and the best way to do that is also to understand what is the mentality and the culture of the people that we are encountering when we're here on the ground. So this is one basic thing. Another, how can I say, practical aspect that I can give as an advice to the locals here is it's very difficult for the foreign party to integrate when the locals tend to leave us alone in our own corner, basically. These are just these people over here. Yeah, but these people are individuals, actually. They have something to bring on the table. All right, so let's at least give them a chance of a conversation, or maybe 2 conversations, or maybe 10. People are more prone to open themselves the more time you spend with them. So this is just natural. So just making even that extra step of checking, hey, how are you doing today? Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help you today? Sometimes it makes a difference, and a big one at that.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Michael, what are some common misconceptions that Maltese people might hold about migrants as neighbors, and how can we challenge these assumptions in everyday life?
I think the common misconceptions, there aren't any common misconceptions, in the sense that the impression I have is that they would be specific to various communities. It's one way. It's one thing if you have people, I don't know, coming from Eastern Europe. Another thing if you have people coming from Sub-Saharan Africa. Another thing, I don't know, if you have people coming from the Maghreb or the Middle East. Okay, so there are different miscommunities, and there are misconceptions, and then there are various. And something which is also very interesting is that we have been receiving migration. I started following the phenomenon in the early 2000s, when migration was primarily from Africa. From Africa, it was by boat. Okay, we didn't have any people from India. Okay, in relation to whom we have other misconceptions today. We didn't have people from the Philippines. We had very few people from Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth. And one thing which I noticed that at times the misconceptions change. What we can do about it? It's very easy to say education. Okay, it's very easy to say education, and that can play a role. But as remind me the name? Lorraine, sorry, I'm terrible for names.
It's okay, no worries.
Okay. As Lorraine was saying, I mean, human encounter is very, very, very important. Okay, human encounter is very, very, very important. However, there could also be sites. Okay, so human encounter is very important to realize, okay, that some of your misconceptions are in fact misconceptions. Okay, I mean, if I have a misconception about Lorraine and I never meet her, okay, nothing will break my misconception. Okay, if I come to know her, maybe I'll change my mind. Okay, I'll probably change my mind. Something which is very important is, I think, that there should be sites within local communities where, okay, you can have these encounters. Okay, and this could be something which is related to the question you asked Lorraine, okay, about preserving the community, okay, while at the same time, okay, not trying to overtake. I don't know. You can have schools, obviously, okay, where you have people. I mean, today our schools are very diverse, okay, in some localities more than others, okay, St. Paul's Bay and others. They have been there. They have a history. They have been diverse for many years, okay. But even in other localities which might be more remote, okay, today you have more diversity. You could have, I don't know, a school could organize, okay, days or events related to the particular communities, okay, from where students hail, okay. Food could be another important aspect in these communities, but also, I don't know, churches. Okay, this is also something which is very, I think, which is also a site where you can have this encounter, which ultimately, I believe, also, I don't know, sports clubs. Okay, these are, I think, these sites are fundamental if, okay, we are to break the stereotypes, if I may say so. So to answer your question in a nutshell, I don't think there is just one stereotype for all migrants. I mean, we have, unfortunately, different stereotypes with regards to different communities. The way forward, I think, is encounter at various levels, both individual, as Lorraine suggested, but also in terms of local communities or institutions within the local communities which can make an effort, okay, to bring together, okay, people to know each other.
What I would like to add as well is that, of course, there are stereotypes that are circulating. Mostly they are directed into the foreign communities and stuff like that. But interestingly, I never hear stereotypes that could be circulating concerning the Maltese community, basically.
I refrained from asking. Do you have stereotypes about us?
Yes.
Yes.
There are a number of those.
You'll tell me about them now or later?
Maybe later.
Okay.
I have a couple of those, actually. But obviously that I mean, even your reaction, Dr. Michael, it says a lot, right? Because it's interesting that you would know the stereotypes that are circulating. Maybe in the line of your work you would have that knowledge, but not knowing the stereotypes that are circulating about the Maltese community, I find it very interesting, right?
To be fair, a Palestinian friend once used to tell me that they have a certain stereotype about us.
Okay, so
but with regards to their communities,
But that's why it's even more important, basically, to spend the time with these communities per se, because you mentioned in your introduction, I believe that I come from a Judeo-Christian background. So going back to that fundamental, God is a spirit, originally, right? He created man and woman, Adam and Eve, all right? But it's clearly written in the Bible, in the Torah, and everywhere that every day he would meet them. in the garden. So what am I trying to say? God is all powerful. He's almighty. He's all everything, right? So in reality, he didn't need the humans to be created because he has all of these attributes to himself. But not only he created them because he wanted to fellowship with people that are in his image, all right? But it's also to create that community to fellowship together. If an almighty one, an all-powerful one is doing that, our creator is doing that, who are we as humans not to do it with each other, let alone with God himself? And I think that's a question that, we need to think of.
Thank you, which actually leads me on to my next question for you. Can you describe what it means for third country nationals to feel seen, included, and psychologically safe as they adapt to the reality of living in Malta?
That's not necessarily an easy question to answer because at the end of the day, it depends, in my humble opinion, of the background of the person. If I'm coming from a country where my own government had put a price on my head, everywhere I would be going, I would always have, I would always look against my shoulder, basically, to make sure that I'm safe. Right? So let alone thousands of individuals. We've seen people from Eastern Europe. They may not be at the position where they have to look over their shoulder to make sure that they are safe, but they are people that used to believe, I'm pretty sure they thought at some point, could this happen to us? Usually it happens to African and to Syrians and to Sudanese and, to those countries. But I am pretty sure that 10 years ago, they would have never thought that they would be in, quote unquote, the same boat. Ironically, the choice of word, basically, as other communities, basically. But that did happen to them. All right. So on the other hand, we've also had communities where they decided to switch countries for different reasons. So what would make them feel safe? I do not necessarily know. One thing that I can tell you about myself is that I lost my parents when I was a child. Okay, so me moving in a different country, for me, I know that as an orphan, I would already be fragile. People would try to take advantage of me, whether it's the system or individuals around me or whatever. People would automatically, and I am a woman as well, so it's like, but what would make me feel safe? It depends on the history or on the background of the person that you're facing, which is why it's important to spend time with them.
Thank you very much. And to get to understand what their background is like and how you can make them feel safe individually and not just as a cluster.
Exactly.
Thanks very much, Lorraine. Finally, I'd like to ask you, Michael, do you have any simple tips that you can share on how to be a good neighbor for new arrivals who are coming into Malta and wanting to, be part of the society and build, an inclusive community, as Lorraine has explained, moving from one country to another? Any tips that you have to share with us?
Be a good neighbor from the perspective of the Maltese. I think it recalls to what Lorraine had said earlier. I think a good thing would be to invite them over for dinner.
Okay.
In the sense, listen to their stories. That's something which is very, very, very important. Listening to their stories, why.
Understand their perspective. Understand what can be a shock for them, and let them understand what may be a shock for us too. Difference in culture. This is one example that I usually give. Sorry to have interrupted you.
No, not at all.
You would see people I'm thinking Japan or South Korea, one of these countries, whereby when somebody hands you a gift, all right, it's very rude to open that gift in front of them.
Okay.
All right. But in cultures, as in Western cultures, our culture here in Europe, in Africa, when someone hands you a gift, they are expecting you to open it in front of them because they want to see the reaction in your eyes, right? So it's like that's what I'm saying. We need to spend that time with these communities, with these individual people to understand what makes them tick and see where we can meet somewhere in the middle. Or at least explain to them that we don't mean it as offensive. This is how we do things here.
Because when you don't listen to your story, it's very easy to have stereotypes reinforced and to ultimately dehumanize the other party. Okay? So in terms of neighborhood, understood literally, I think inviting someone over to dinner, actually or metaphorically, it's a very, very good icebreaker.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah. Thank you very much for both of you for joining us today. And once again, thank you to Lorraine and Michael. They joined us today. They shared their expertise, their vision, their values, their goals of how we can build a more inclusive society in Malta. So thank you once again for joining us, Lorraine.
Thank you very much, Nestle. Thank you.
And Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Empower to Integrate, a collaborative initiative by Aditus Foundation and the African Media Association Malta. This program is dedicated to advancing integration and social inclusion for third country nationals in Malta. It is funded by the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, co-funded by the European Union and carried out in collaboration with the Parliamentary Secretariat for European Funds.